Okay, so Parshas Behaalos'cha. Let's see how much we can get through. The first idea is I saw in Rabbi Rosner's Sefer quoting someone called Rabbi Aaron Lewin in Hadrash V'Ha'iyun. He says something very, very interesting. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com and I'll send you the handouts. The pasuk says at the beginning of Parshas Behaalos'cha, "V'zeh ma'aseh ha'menorah miksha zohav adirecha al pircha mikshahi." Miksha, the menorah is going to be miksha. It's understood to be, Rashi explains, that it's got to be solid. You can't sort of make one sort of arm of the menorah, another one, and then attach them, but rather it's a block of gold, and you sort of chisel out and you make and you fashion your menorah. That's what miksha means. Now, there are two other kelim in the Mishkan which are also miksha. What are the two other kelim in the Mishkan which have got to be solid? So this is what the Drash V'Ayin is going to talk about and what the significance of these three are. Take a look at the second box. Hine, b'Mishkan haya shleisha kelim shaya asuyim miksha. There are three kelim which were made solid. HaMenorah, the menorah that we've just mentioned, K'meshenem Akal Parsha v'zeh ma'aseh HaMenorah miksha zahav. The second one is the chatzotzros, the trumpets, which are also in this week's parsha. K'meshenem el Alon, also in our sedra. Asei lechoshte chatzotzros kesef miksha ta'aseh osom. They've got to be solid. And the third ones are the kruvim. The kruvim, as it says in Parshas Truma, v'alsisa shnaim kruvim zahav miksha ta'aseh osom. So these three, the menorah, the chatzotzros, and the kruvim, have all got to be solid gold, or solid substance. V'nira, says the Drash V'Ayin, sheshleishes hakelim ha'ela, these three kelim, ha'menorah, chatzotzros, kruvim, yecholim lahavlit lanu, they should emphasize to us, ulurames, shleisha miktzos, there are three areas, shebohem beyichud, these three in particular, me'ad tzorech she'adam yeh kosher beruchai, that a person has got to be steadfast. There are miksha means, sorry, let me just turn this off. Miksha means that these particular items have got to be solid, and it shows that you need a certain backbone, a certain steadfastness in respect of all three. Without moving, and sort of to go with the wind in these three areas. And then he'll achieve the objective that a person is focused on. So let's go through each of the three. The first one is the menorah. The menorah, as we know, symbolizes Torah. Kiner mitzvah v'Torah or. The menorah is a symbolism of Torah knowledge, and we know that when it comes to limud HaTorah, it needs tremendous tenacity, a very strong commitment. The Gemara in Bracha says, "Minayin she'ein divrei Torah miskaymin el b'misha meimis atzmei aleha." Torah will only last from someone who literally kills himself over Torah. That means that right now, when I'm learning, you're dead to the world. Nothing else is going on, your phone is ringing, the customers are waiting for you, whatever it may be, you may miss atzmim min HaTorah. That's the Gemara in Bracha Samach Gimel Beis. Moreover, to be a transmitter of Torah, that needs some sort of uncompromising authenticity. Like the Gemara says in Tanis, Kol Talmid Chacham she'ein kosher kabarzel ein a Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham who sort of goes, flows with the wind, then he's not a Talmid Chacham. He's got to be kosher kabarzel. So the first keli of the Mishkan, which is going to be miksha, which symbolizes the strong backbone, is the menorah, which is the symbolism of Torah. The next one is the chatzotzros. So what does that represent? Says the Drash V'Ayin very beautifully. He quotes a Gemara in Moed Katan Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Ki sifsei kohen yishmuru das v'Torah yevakshu mipihu. That the lips of the kohen should speak knowledge. The Torah Yivakshu Mipihu Ki Malach Hashem Tzavakoisu. So this is a famous pasuk in Malachi. The Kohen, who is of course the teacher of Torah, he is compared to a Malach Hashem. So the Gemara says there in Moed Katan Yuzayin Amud Aleph, famous Gemara, Im Harav Doime LeMalach Hashem Tzavakois. If the Rav is angelic, he appears like an angel, Yivakshu Torah Mipihu, V'im Lav Al Yivakshu Torah Mipihu. So the Gemara is saying, who is the authentic Torah teacher? Only someone who is doime lemalach. Now, in what respect is the Rav meant to be doime lemalach? In what respect is he meant to be like an angel? Says the Drash V'Ayin, HaMalach yikra b'shem oimed. A malach is called an oimed. we're called mahalchim bein ha'omdim. Human beings, as opposed to malachim, we're mahalchim, we walk bein ha'omdim. One of the reasons we stand straight with our knees not bent during Shemona Esrei is we're angelic. The malachim don't have knee bones, knee joints, because they're considered omdim and they're not mahalchim. V'chein ha'makos of serafim omdim mimaloi. Our loveliest omed. The teacher of Torah has got to be an omed. In what respect? Our loveliest kosher beruchai v'omed eson b'daitoi. He's got to be true to his values and strong in his perspective. Lebilti tas v'levli without being moved. He can't just be easy to shake. If a Rabbi, if a Torah teacher is strong in his values and is uncompromising and doesn't just bend with peer pressure, then Yevakesh Torah mepihu. Ki Torah tia nishmas v'dorav yasu haroshim hanidrush. Because then his Torah will make the requisite impression. So that's what the Chatzotzros represents. The third ones are the Kruvim. Now the Kruvim always represent chinuch. Why? You've got these angelic cherubs sitting on top of the Aron HaKodesh. So that really is kiruv, is chinuch. V'lochein, if you look at the bottom paragraph, al ha'ovis lahakshos v'lif'omim games libam. Parents as well sometimes have got to be very true and very fast to their principles. Chazokim beruchom leumas habonim. Aleihem loichiach es b'neihem la'akar milibam kol sherish pere rosh v'lana. Sometimes parents, they detect certain deficiencies in their kids, and they've got to be strong. They can't just be, they're not always, this is a bit controversial, they're not always the friends of their kids, but they should be principled. Now, of course, as he goes on to say, Kol netzia ra v'chol mida nishchasa b'terem tiftacha, before you found a deficiency in the kid, before it sort of sprouts into something more serious, it's not eradicated in the early stage, then sometimes these issues and these bad character traits could fester into bigger problems in later life. An amazing thing, the Medrash in Shmos Rabbah in the beginning says, David HaMelech was criticized for not rebuking his son Avshalom. So the parents have got to be firm. And I remember once being in a certain parents' evening where a certain head teacher took out a book, and the book was called, a non-Jewish book, and it said, How to Say No to Your Children. When I was growing up, I don't think my parents had a difficulty with that, but sometimes in today's generation, some parents find it difficult to say no. But it's not always the right thing to just say yes to everything. Saying no is okay, and I think in generations gone by, parents felt more comfortable with it. But but it needs a balance, as the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Zayin, La'olam tei small doicha v'yamin mekareves. It's the balance. It's always the balance of small doicha. So you need to say the no and to push away, but on the other hand, you need yamin mekareves. It needs the ava, it needs the love as well. So there's of course the balance. So therefore, just to summarize, the Drash Va'iyon says a very beautiful thing, that the three things which need to be mixture solid are the menorah, the Chatzotzros, and the Kruvim. Each one represents something which needs a certain degree of backbone. The menorah is the symbolism of Torah, commitment to learning Torah, and its transmission needs to be uncompromising in its authenticity. And the Chatzotzros represents the teacher of Torah, that he's got to be an omed, that if he's like a malach, then you can learn Torah from him, in as much as a malach is an omed and stays firm in his principles. And the kruvim is parenting, that the kruvim, they also need to be solid, that the children need to know the correct principles, and the parents can't just, again, wave too quickly. Now, let's move on. The next item, I saw quoted in Rabbi Yaakov Bender's beautiful Sefer on Chumash, but I went to the source, the Torah Lamelech, which is Rav Palm's Sefer, and he's got a beautiful piece based on this week's Parsha. I just copied it from the Sefer through the Yotzei HaChochma, and we'll go through it together. It's just beautiful seeing it in the original. Some very, very interesting points. It says the pasuk, Va'ata nafshenu yevesha ein kol bilti el hamon einenu. So this, as we mentioned in the earlier shir, i.e. that the Klal Yisrael in this week's Parsha were complaining about the mon. V'hamon kazer gotu, and the Torah is made. Rashi explains that the mon is so wonderful. How could they complain about it? Says Rav Palm, quoting Rashi, Koloimar, Ru'u Ba'i Olam. Says Rashi famously on this pasuk, see, people in the world, Amma misleinim bonai. Look what my children are complaining about. Vahamon kachu choshuv. After they complain, the Torah itself is being made. Vahamon kazera godhu, etc. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. Why are they complaining? Hine, says Rav Pam. Hachachrozo zu, this declaration, mitzaltzel ba'oznai, rings in my ears, gam hayom, even today. And sometimes in different situations, I hear that voice. Listen, people of the world. Why are you complaining? So listen, look at the examples he gives. Aleph. The guy comes home from work. And he sees the kids, they've played all afternoon, the games are on the floor, they haven't cleared up, you trip over the shoes as you come in, the school bags, a typical home scene. And there's total chaos in the home. And the kids playing, they made a lot of mess. And the guy comes home and is a bit upset and is angry and he argues with his wife about these things. A baskol comes out from Shemayim and says, see, people of the world, why are you complaining? Greater people than you, they pour out their hearts, they're crying and praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they should be merit to have children. They're desperate, they would do anything to have children who are going to make chaos in the house. They would do anything to have kids playing and pouring the Monopoly all over the floor. Base, another example. The teenager comes home from school and he comes home for supper. And he sees what is for supper. There's a plate of tuna. And around the central dish of tuna, there's all nice vegetables, masudarim, but sir cut up beautifully, maisa uman, in a very artistically displayed fashion. And this kid turns around, oid palm tuna? Yeah, we've got tuna again for supper. It's coming out of my nose. And again I hear the noise, the voice, the baskol coming out. Why are you complaining? Do you know how busy your mum was today to get this and to prepare all of this? And she prepared a meal for you, which for thousands of people, for so many people in this world, that meal is considered a shulchan melachim. It's a royal table. Another example. Gimel. The father has a precious child. He's gone off to yeshiva. And he's doing very well there and he's learning with tremendous hasmoda and cheshek. And the father is complaining. And he's warning him, why are you staying in yeshiva further? Why do you need another year in yeshiva, whatever it is? The kid has got cheshek to learn Torah. And he doesn't want to leave the walls of the yeshiva to start studying or to go get a job. The father is worried, where's your parnasa going to be? What's the tachlis? And the son is reliant on the words of Chazal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's got many avenues to give you sustenance. Your job as a parent is to make sure the child is raised for Torah and for Yirah Shamayim. And this kid has got cheshek to learn Torah. And the father is complaining a lot, and argues. Again, a baskol comes out and says, why are you complaining? You've got a kid who's got a cheshek to learn Torah. The final example. Parents have the zechus to marry, to their daughter gets engaged, to ben Torah mitzuyan, to a wonderful young man. A wonderful fellow. Mishpach chashuvim from a choshev family. V'hinei sosoin v'simcha, there's joy in the house. V'gam avi achosin someach moed, on the other side are very happy. In ve'agefen v'in ve'agefen. Ki hakale hi balas shem tov, v'balas chein, the kala is a wonderful young lady, etc. Kale noah v'chasuda. V'hinei higia eis doidim. It comes the time of the wedding. Zman hanisuin. V'yove hasotan v'yiraked b'neihem. And the sotan comes and starts dancing to cause trouble. One family says, "B'mishpachteinu, in our family, we always do it. It's the dad and the dad, the two fathers walk the chosin down to the chuppah. And the mothers walk the kala down. That's our Masorah, the alternative, impossible. And the other side say, no. Esrim Shona on a mispalim for 20 years plus, we've been davening from the bottom of our hearts. And Nizka Ani v'Zugasi Ahirim Yachad, that me and my spouse can walk down our daughter to the wedding. Now we're going to give up on this. Shuvani Shemet Silsul Be'azah. Again, I hear the ringing in my ears. Koraz Mimoin Ru'u Boy Olam Alma Mislein Mitzarim Bottom. Why are you complaining? In Ve'agefen V'Hiluch Daled Amas. For the walking of 4 amas, how long is it already to go down to the chuppah? For a walk which takes 10 seconds, you're causing such chaos and havoc. Rabbi quotes it, it's a famous thing, that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was once asked about this. The parents come to him and say to him what to do. Again, I don't know which side of the fence they were on, but they wanted it one way, not the other. So they said to Rabbi Yaakov, what's the Rosh Yeshiva's minhag? And he says, my minhag is to do whatever my mechutin wants. That's my minhag. And he had 6 children, Rabbi Yaakov. 3 he walked with his wife, and 3 he walked with his mechutin. But as he said, my minhag is to do whatever my mechutin wants. What a beautiful approach. Reb Chaim, I see, Reb Bender says an amazing story. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz's eldest daughter, her name was Etel, and she married the famous Reb Nachum Pasovitz. Reb Nachum Pasovitz was the Rosh Yeshiva in the Mir. He died in the mid-80s, but the father-in-law of Rosh Arieli and Rabbi Yitzchak Hellman, the third son-in-law. Rabbi Nachum was the famous Rosh Yeshiva in the Mir in the 70s and 80s. And he married the daughter of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Just before the chuppah, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz and his wife went over to their eldest daughter, the first child, and Reb Chaim himself was a survivor, and he was in Shanghai in the war. He held the whole yeshiva on his shoulders. And he said to his daughter, he said, Etel, we're not going to be walking you down the chuppah. We've got somebody else. It was Moshe Finkel who did it. Moshe Finkel and his wife, he said to look, your chassan, Nachum Pasovitz, has lost his parents, has lost his entire family in the war. He said, I can't do it to him that he sees that you are walked down by your parents, it'll be too painful. Can you imagine? In other words, he himself is a survivor. He's been to Shanghai, he's escaped Europe, the war years were horrific, and he comes and Baruch Hashem, he survived, and you've rebuilt, and you've got married, and you've got children to marry off, and you're dreaming of this day, you're going to walk your daughter down for the chuppah, but because of the other person, the chassan sensitivity, what a godless. And sure enough, he and his wife did not walk his own daughter down to the chuppah. Amazing thing. One final thing, Rabbi Yaakov Bender says, also a fabulous anecdote, unbelievable anecdote. The Chazon Ish was in Bnei Brak. So this is the years just after the war. There was an orphanage of girls in Bnei Brak, and one time a fellow came into the Chazon Ish furious, up in arms, because Shalosh Shuda's time the girls were singing and the windows were open. It's hot in Bnei Brak, and the singing was going out into the streets of Bnei Brak, and the guy was furious at the kalisha that he was hearing, and he ran into the Chazon Ish. And he told him that they're girls, there's the orphanage here, and they're singing, and the Chazon, and there's the Kalisha in the streets, and the Chazon Ish says to him, thank you. He says, thank you for telling me the good news, that there are girls who are orphans, and they're already singing. It's after the war, a few years after the war, and they've been through what they've been through, and they're singing. Thank you for telling me the good news. It's just a different perspective. But that's really the medrash. That's really what Rashi means when they complained about the mon. Look what they're complaining about. The mon is so choshev. So a very beautiful piece from Rav Rampam. Okay, let's just finish off one final piece. This is from Rabbi Roberts' Sefer, the end of the third page. Lots to say on Parshas Behaalos'cha, but one final piece, which is to do with Pesach Sheni. The Pasuk says, "Vayomru ha'anoshim ha'hema elav." There were people who were Tomei Pesach in the first Pesach, and they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Anachnu tmeim lenefesh adam lama nigara." The famous words, "Lama nigara." Why should we lose out? And sure enough, Moshe Rabbeinu goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He tells him to wait. Rashi says, well, Ashrim Yulud Ish, I think. Happy is the child of a woman who can just say, wait, I'm going to speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's so confident, so certain, they'll have an audience with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and they'll get an answer. So he asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and sure enough, we have Pesach Sheni. Now, what is greater? Godel HaMetzuva V'Iseh or Misha Eina Metzuva V'Iseh? For example, you have a man and a woman. They both shake lulav on Sukkos. The woman is not Metzuva. She doesn't have to. It's a mitzvah seishas man grama. And the man is Metzuva. So who gets more schar? The man or the woman? The man who is commanded to do it, or the woman who does it voluntarily? Now you could argue both. You could argue, well, of course the woman gets more schar. She's doing it voluntarily. He's got to do it. So he doesn't get so much schar. But the Gemara concludes, Gadol ha-metzuva v'oiseh yoseh memisha eina metzuva. Why? Tosfos gives in two different places, two different reasons. One is, the reason is that there's an instinctive Yetzer Hara. When you're Metzuva to do it, automatically, you're Metzuva, the Yetzer Hara is going to try and stop you. So for the guy, it's actually harder to shake the lulav, because there's a Yetzer Hara saying, don't shake it. For the woman, there's no Yetzer Hara to do, not to shake it, because she's not Metzuva. Fine, that's one explanation. The other explanation is, imagine the husband and wife sitting in the sukkah. So she's sitting there enjoying the sukkah and the ambiance, and who doesn't enjoy sitting in the sukkah? And he's sitting there, like, am I underneath the sukkah? Yeah? No. Yeah? Am I underneath the sukkah? So because of that, he's constantly looking more. So the Gemara concludes, Gadol Metzuva V'Oiseh. However, says Rabbi Roberts, there is a level which is even higher than Metzuva V'Oiseh. And that is the people who said Lama Nigora. That's even higher. Why? Because they were so frustrated that they couldn't do it the first time round. They're yearning to do mitzvahs, and they are yearning to do for growth in ruchnius. They're desperate for Pesach Sheni. That's an even higher level than someone who's Metzuva V'Oiseh. And Rabbi Eliezer Kahan, who was the Manal in Gateshead, that's Chazan Siegel's father-in-law, he suggested that this midah comes from Avram Avinu. Why? Because Avram Avinu at the beginning of Parshas Vayero is sitting at the entrance of his ohel. He's just recovering from a very serious operation, and he's halachically exempt from Hachnosas Orchim. He's an Einus, and yet he's yearning to do the mitzvah of Hachnosas Orchim. And it's his descendants, he sort of imbues in his descendants the midah of Lama Nigara. Why should I lose out? I want to do the mitzvah. And he says that perhaps is the idea in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Because the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says this, in the famous Gemara at the beginning of Daf Gimel and Aleph at the bottom, turning over the page. In the Osid Lavoi, in times to come, the non-Jewish people will come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why didn't you give us the Torah? We also wanted to keep the Torah. So that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, here's the Torah. Here's the mitzvah of Sukkah. Try out the mitzvah of Sukkah. So Kol Echad, everyone goes to the Rosh Gagoy, and they keep the mitzvah of Sukkah. VaKadosh Baruch Hu makdir aleihem chama b'tkufas Tammuz. The scorching heat of the sun in Tammuz comes down. The Kol Echad ve'echad mebayat sukkos v'yotze, and each one of the non-Jewish people, it's too hot for them, and they leave the sukkah, and they kick it. Mebayat b'sukkosei. V'ha'amr sen HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tshunyan and b'riyosov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not playing games. Why does he make it so hot? Because it can happen with the Jewish people as well. They can also be in the sukkah and there can be tsar. So they're tsar, they're potter from the sukkah. Sometimes in Israel it's too hot to sit in the sukkah. Here in London it's often too cold, too rainy to sit in the sukkah. But in some places it's too hot. So they're potter. Says the Gemara, need the potter butmi mevatik. They shouldn't kick it when they come out. So you see that that Klal Yisrael, they don't kick it when they come out. They're sorry when they come out. They're mitzta'er. Rabbi Aaron Kotler once told the Rishach that he once saw a person sitting on the floor inside his house during Sukkot, distraught. So what's the problem? It's raining outside. I feel like a mourner. I'm sitting on the floor because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to sit in the Sukkah. That's the approach. So there's a level which is even higher than Mitzvah V'Oser, and that is Loma Nigara. That's really what emerges. So what have we seen from today's Shiur? Number one, this beautiful idea of the Drash V'Iyun, that there are three kelim, the menorah at the beginning of the Parsha, Miksha Zahav, there are three kelim, the menorah, the chatzos, and the kruvim, a mixture, they've got to be solid to represent that each of these three things needs commitment, steadfast backbone, Torah knowledge, the chatzos, which means the transmission of Torah, the Rav has got to be like a Malach Elokim, and as much as he's an Omeid, he stays firm and strong. And the Kruvim is parenting. Sometimes parents have got to say, lay down the law and be strong in their principles as well. And then you have that beautiful piece from Rav Palm when they complained against the Mon, and they said, Ru'u boy olam al ma mislein bonai, and all those examples. And then the beautiful idea of Rabbi Roberts of the level which is even higher than the Mitzvah V'Oser is the level of Loma Nigara. Okay, we'll leave it there.